Steve McQueen's journey from obscurity to superstardom is a tale of perseverance, raw talent, and sheer determination. Born in 1930 in Beech Grove, Indiana, McQueen's childhood was far from easy. Raised in poverty, McQueen's father abandoned him when he was just an infant, and his mother, struggling with her own issues, sent him to a home for troubled children. It was clear from an early age that McQueen had a rebellious streak, a trait that would define him both on and off the screen. As a young man, McQueen found solace in a series of rough-and-tumble jobs, but nothing seemed to hold his interest for long. His love for racing cars and motorcycles, however, was a passion that stayed with him, and it's here that McQueen's love for speed would find a home. His early years were marked by a string of odd jobs, including stints as a lumberjack and a time spent in the U.S. Marine Corps, where his toughness and knack for surviving harsh conditions would shape the man he would later become. But it wasn't until McQueen moved to New York City that his life truly began to take shape. He enrolled at the Actors Studio, where his natural charisma and rebellious nature were immediately apparent. His early acting years were filled with small television roles, but it didn't take long before McQueen's unique screen presence captured the attention of Hollywood. In 1958, McQueen landed his first major role in The Blob, a B-movie that became a cult classic. While the film itself wasn't a critical hit, McQueen's performance stood out, and Hollywood quickly took notice. But it was his role in The Magnificent Seven, 1960, that marked his first major breakout. McQueen, who played the character of Vin Tanner, stood out among a star-studded ensemble cast, proving that he wasn't just another face in the crowd. His rugged charm and understated intensity made him an immediate sensation, and from that point on, his career was on an upward trajectory. The 1960s saw McQueen become one of the biggest movie stars in the world, and his reputation as a bad boy of Hollywood took shape. His on-screen persona, the tough, silent rebel, wasn't a stretch from the man himself. He became known for his intense focus on his craft, but also for his penchant for going against the grain of Hollywood's carefully constructed image of stars. McQueen wasn't just a rebel on screen, he was one off-screen too. He resisted the typical image of the polished Hollywood heartthrob, choosing instead to embrace his own, more rugged and unrefined appeal. Throughout the early years of his career, McQueen's roles became more varied. From the action-packed Bullitt, 1968, where he delivered one of the most iconic car chase scenes in cinematic history, to the Thomas Crown Affair, 1968, where he showcased his suave, charming side, McQueen continued to expand his range as an actor. But behind his growing success, there were whispers of his increasingly troubled personal life. McQueen, whose reputation for being difficult to work with was already well established, was becoming more of a wild card in Hollywood. His rising star power was matched only by his growing reputation as a man who couldn't and wouldn't be controlled. Despite all the success, McQueen remained an enigma. His love for motorcycles and racing cars was well documented, but it was clear that his true passion lay in living life on his own terms, no matter the cost. McQueen's rebellious nature made him an outsider even in the most exclusive circles of Hollywood, and his appeal was only amplified by the fact that he seemed to care little about fitting in. In many ways, his early years of fame were defined as much by his contradictions, his fierce independence and inner turmoil, as by his star power. As the 1960s progressed, Steve McQueen was not just becoming a Hollywood icon, he was becoming a symbol of the cool, untouchable rebel who was above the rules of the industry. But even as he was riding high in his career, the secrets of his personal life were beginning to surface. His legendary status was built on much more than his tough guy roles. It was grounded in his deep desire to be something more than the sum of his parts. But what many didn't know was that the man behind the roles was hiding a much darker and more complex story, one that would soon come to the forefront. Steve McQueen wasn't just famous for his role as the ultimate anti-hero on screen, his off-screen romantic life was just as infamous. While Hollywood tabloids often focused on his career, it was McQueen's relationships and affairs that kept the public guessing and talking. The King of Cool had a way with women, and his personal life was marked by high-profile marriages, passionate affairs, and a reputation for being a notoriously difficult lover. McQueen's first major marriage was to actress Neil Adams, whom he wed in 1956. At the time, Adams was an established actress in her own right, but McQueen's stardom was quickly eclipsing her own. The two seemed like the perfect match, both ambitious and driven, but the marriage was anything but perfect. McQueen, notorious for his wanderlust and independence, was soon caught up in a string of affairs that would make headlines for years to come. His marriage to Adams was strained by his infidelities, and the pressure of his rising fame only worsened things. Adams and McQueen's relationship had started out strong, but as McQueen's career soared, their connection began to crumble. The actor's fame and reputation as a womanizer grew, and soon rumors of his affairs with other women began to surface. McQueen's most infamous affair at this time was with the stunning actress Ali MacGraw. The two met on the set of The Getaway in 1972, and their chemistry was undeniable. Their relationship became the talk of Hollywood, with McQueen's reputation for being difficult and emotionally distant only adding fuel to the fire. While McQueen and MacGraw had an undeniable spark, their relationship was turbulent and short-lived. Their romance was marred by jealousy, distrust, and McQueen's unyielding desire for independence. McQueen was notoriously possessive and often displayed erratic behavior in his relationships, a pattern that would come to define many of his future romances. As their relationship unraveled, McQueen's marriage to Adams also began to disintegrate. The two divorced in 1972, and McQueen's time with MacGraw came to an end soon after. Despite the breakup, McQueen was never without a companion. He moved on quickly, and within a year, he was romantically linked to actress Stephanie Powers, his co-star in the hit television series Heart to Heart. Their relationship was one of the most publicized of McQueen's affairs, and while it lasted for several years, it too was marked by tumult. McQueen's refusal to settle down and his ongoing struggles with jealousy and possessiveness created constant friction between the two, and ultimately, their relationship also ended. Powers later revealed that McQueen's intense emotional energy often led to unpredictable behavior, making their relationship both exhilarating and exhausting. However, McQueen's personal relationships didn't end there. He had a long list of rumored affairs with several other prominent women in Hollywood, including actresses such as Jacqueline Bisset and even the legendary actress Natalie Wood. While many of these affairs remained shrouded in secrecy, it was clear that McQueen's attraction to powerful, independent women was one of the defining features of his personal life. These relationships often led to drama, public confrontations, and the kind of scandal that made McQueen an even bigger figure in Hollywood gossip columns. Yet, behind the headlines and the whirlwind romances, McQueen's love life was a reflection of his deeper struggles with commitment and emotional intimacy. Though he had numerous lovers, few seemed to understand the real Steve McQueen. His ability to charm women was matched only by his inability to truly connect with them. The tension between McQueen's desire for independence and his need for affection was a constant throughout his relationships, leaving many to wonder whether he would ever find the stability and peace that seemed so elusive. McQueen's romantic escapades were often portrayed as part of his broader persona, the tough, aloof hero who needed no one but himself. Yet, in the private corners of his life, McQueen was a man deeply searching for love and emotional connection. His high-profile marriages and affairs were less about scandal and more about his internal conflicts. McQueen's relationships were a battleground, one in which he struggled to balance his independence with a need for intimacy, a dynamic that often led to heartbreak, both for him and for those who became a part of his life. While Steve McQueen's tumultuous relationships with well-known actresses like Ali MacGraw and Neil Adams were frequently splashed across tabloids, there were whispers of a much more secretive romance that managed to evade the public eye. This affair, one of McQueen's most elusive, involved a Hollywood legend whose name was often spoken in the same breath as McQueen's, though they were rarely seen together. Rumors about this hidden romance have circulated for decades, but little evidence has ever surfaced to fully confirm what happened behind closed doors. For years, the identity of the star involved in McQueen's secret love affair remained one of Hollywood's most tantalizing mysteries. The actress in question was a powerful force in the industry, a woman whose beauty and talent had made her a household name. She had a reputation for being elusive, much like McQueen himself, which is why their romance, if true, seemed almost too perfect. Was this affair simply another rumor fueled by speculation, or was it a love story kept under wraps for reasons McQueen never wanted to reveal? The evidence surrounding this romance remains mostly circumstantial, but there were certain clues that hinted at a much deeper connection between McQueen and the actress. In interviews, McQueen was often cryptic when asked about his personal life, never fully revealing the extent of his relationships. Some of his closest friends and colleagues have suggested that McQueen's secret relationship was not a fleeting affair, but something far more meaningful, even if it was destined to remain a private part of his life. The secrecy surrounding the romance may have had to do with the pair's mutual desire for privacy, a rarity in an industry that thrived on attention and public personas. McQueen, who resented the invasive nature of Hollywood press, was known for guarding his private life fiercely. The actress, too, had long cultivated an image of mystery and independence, often dodging questions about her personal relationships. If they were indeed involved, their desire to keep the relationship under wraps only added to the allure. As with many of McQueen's affairs, this relationship was rumored to have ended in heartbreak, though the details of the breakup remain unclear. Was the love affair a casualty of McQueen's larger-than-life persona and his need for control, or did the actress herself grow weary of the intense, tumultuous nature of their bond? Perhaps both parties were too committed to maintaining their individual careers and public images, something that would have made it difficult to sustain a relationship in the long run. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, the speculation about McQueen's hidden love affair became a defining element of his mystique. The notion that such a powerful figure in Hollywood had a secret romance with one of the industry's most enigmatic stars only added to his legend. It played into the narrative that McQueen was a man of mystery, a star whose personal life was just as interesting and controversial as his film roles. What made this particular romance so compelling was its very secrecy. In a town known for its tabloid headlines and public relationships, the idea of a love affair kept hidden for so long was almost unheard of. For fans and Hollywood insiders alike, the affair was a tantalizing puzzle, one that, despite years of speculation, has never been fully solved. But for McQueen, the affair may have been just one of many that offered him the briefest moments of intimacy and connection in an otherwise solitary life. While McQueen's reputation as a ladies' man is well documented, it's clear that there was more to his relationships than the public ever saw. Beneath the carefully crafted image of the tough guy and the Hollywood rebel was a man who, like many others, craved meaningful connections. His hidden love affair with this famous star serves as a reminder that even the most enigmatic celebrities can have private, vulnerable sides that remain out of view. The love story, though largely forgotten by the public, remains a key part of McQueen's legacy, proof that the King of Cool was also a man who, for all his bravado, longed for love. While Steve McQueen's persona as the King of Cool made him a beloved icon, the Hollywood machine wasn't always as enamored with him. Behind his tough guy image and career-making roles, McQueen often found himself clashing with the very industry that had made him a star. His refusal to conform to Hollywood standards and expectations became both his trademark and his curse. His relationships with directors, producers, and fellow actors were fraught with tension, and as McQueen's star power rose, so did his reputation for being difficult to work with. The root of McQueen's disdain for Hollywood lay in his experiences with the system early in his career. Hollywood was known for being a place where the press and studio heads controlled everything from an actor's public image to their personal relationships. McQueen, who had always marched to the beat of his own drum, was unwilling to bow to the rules of the game. The industry's rigid structure and the way it treated its stars as mere commodities to be exploited struck McQueen as exploitative and shallow. Over time, his discomfort with the industry became more evident, and he began pushing back against its conventions in bold and sometimes reckless ways. Perhaps the most infamous example of McQueen's difficult relationship with Hollywood occurred during the filming of The Great Escape, 1963, a film that cemented his status as a leading man. McQueen, who had a reputation for taking risks, was particularly drawn to the film's action sequences. But his desire for authenticity led to clashes with both the director and the studio, who often found his ideas unworkable. McQueen famously demanded that he be allowed to perform his own stunts, something the studio feared would lead to injury. But McQueen, always determined to be true to his role, defied their warnings. The film's iconic motorcycle chase scene, which McQueen famously performed without a stunt double, became one of the most memorable moments in cinematic history. It also solidified McQueen's reputation as an actor who would go to any lengths to deliver the best performance possible. But McQueen's rebellious nature was not always appreciated. The actor's insistence on performing stunts his way and his tendency to challenge authority on set made him a divisive figure in Hollywood. Directors and producers found it increasingly difficult to work with him, as McQueen's ego and uncompromising attitude often created friction on set. He was known to walk off film sets at the slightest hint of dissatisfaction, leaving producers scrambling to salvage a project that had already been marred by delays and drama. His unpredictable nature, paired with his rising stardom, only made matters worse. McQueen was no longer just a talented actor. He was a force to be reckoned with, and his behavior on set made him both a blessing and a nightmare for the industry. By the 1970s, McQueen's personal life had become as infamous as his professional one. His marriage to Ollie McGraw ended, and his long-standing issues with alcoholism and substance abuse grew more problematic. Hollywood began to take notice, not just of McQueen's raw talent, but of the dark side of his persona. His career began to suffer as his personal problems took center stage. Studios began to hesitate before offering him leading roles, fearing his volatile behavior would sabotage a film's production. But McQueen's resistance to Hollywood's controlling influence was not just an act of rebellion. It was a reflection of deeper personal struggles. Behind his tough exterior was a man who had been shaped by an incredibly difficult childhood. McQueen had come from nothing, and his early life had been marked by abandonment and hardship. The anger and frustration that had been building inside him for years began to surface in more destructive ways as he entered his prime. His rejection of Hollywood wasn't just about his distaste for the industry. It was about his own fears of being controlled and used. McQueen feared that the very people who had helped elevate him to stardom would eventually discard him, just as he had been discarded by those closest to him in his youth. McQueen's resistance to Hollywood's demands also made him a loner. Unlike other stars who surrounded themselves with a team of advisors and publicists, McQueen kept a relatively small circle of trusted individuals. He was known for keeping his personal life private and guarded, even as his image was being cultivated by the press. Despite his fame, McQueen seemed like an outsider, a man who never truly felt at home in the world of glitz and glamour that surrounded him. This sense of isolation was palpable in both his professional and personal life, and it only deepened as his career continued to evolve. The tension between McQueen and Hollywood reached its peak when he became more selective about the roles he took. By the mid-1970s, McQueen had become a box office draw, but he had also become a wild card. Studios could no longer dictate his career. He was no longer just a product of the Hollywood system. He had become a brand unto himself. McQueen had crafted an image that transcended the studio system, and in doing so, he was able to maintain his independence in an industry built on control. But even as McQueen fought to maintain his autonomy, the pressure of fame, coupled with his personal demons, took its toll. His career, once soaring to new heights, began to falter as his personal life spiraled out of control. By the time the 1980s arrived, McQueen's run in Hollywood was nearing its end. His body was showing signs of wear, and his battles with substance abuse and his health were becoming impossible to ignore. McQueen's refusal to play by Hollywood's rules may have made him an icon, but it also contributed to his downfall. As much as McQueen fought against the pressures of Hollywood, the system ultimately wore him down. The troubled actor's relationships with the industry became just another example of the fine line between brilliance and self-destruction, a constant battle between artistic integrity and the destructive forces of fame. Steve McQueen wasn't just a star, he was a force of nature, a symbol of defiance in an industry that demanded conformity. As Hollywood's biggest rebel, McQueen's image was carefully constructed, but was also shaped by his refusal to adhere to the rules. He wasn't just a man who didn't want to be told what to do. He was a man who actively sought out ways to break free from the confines of an industry built on control. His rebellion wasn't just a public persona, it was the essence of who he was. But this power to subvert the system became both his greatest strength and his biggest challenge. Hollywood in the 1960s and 1970s was a place where stars were expected to play their part, to be moldable, marketable, and controllable. McQueen, however, shattered that mold. His attitude was built on the idea that no one could dictate his career path or personal life, and his rebellious nature didn't just create friction, it sparked fear within the Hollywood establishment. The studios, accustomed to having a firm grip on their stars, had never encountered someone like McQueen. He had a magnetic presence on screen and an intense aura of independence off screen. But with this power came unpredictability. The level of control the McQueen exerted over his own career was unprecedented. He demanded that certain projects be altered to suit his vision, and in many cases, he rewrote scripts or negotiated for more creative control. One example of this is his work on Bullitt 1968, a film that not only cemented McQueen as the quintessential tough guy, but also showcased his hands-on approach to filmmaking. From the iconic car chase scene to his insistence on using real cars and real stunts, McQueen took matters into his own hands. He wasn't afraid to challenge directors and producers, and while this made him a sought-after star, it also made him a complicated figure to manage. McQueen's reputation as a rebel wasn't limited to his career. His personal life mirrored the chaos of his professional world. He famously lived in a manner that defied the conventions of Hollywood's glamour and excess. Unlike many stars who surrounded themselves with publicists and agents, McQueen kept his circle small and was deeply distrustful of anyone he saw as part of the Hollywood machine. He disliked the way his image was curated by studio heads, and he often rejected roles that he felt were beneath him or too predictable. This tendency to push against the status quo wasn't just about ego. It was a reflection of his deep-seated fear of being controlled or exploited, just as he had been as a child. As McQueen's star rose, so did the pressure to conform. But he resisted at every turn. His decisions about the roles he took and the films he agreed to were often controversial. He passed on high-profile projects, including Star Wars, 1977, which could have solidified his place in pop culture for generations to come. Instead, McQueen refused to take part in anything that he didn't feel spoke to his own personal vision or ambition. And his refusal to follow Hollywood's carefully crafted guidelines made studio executives nervous. They knew that McQueen wasn't just another actor. They knew he was a man who could reshape the trajectory of any film he was part of. This fear of McQueen's power in Hollywood was not unfounded. His unpredictability and refusal to abide by the typical star system left producers and executives in a constant state of anxiety. They could no longer rely on the old formula of shaping a star's image and career. McQueen was shaping it himself. The more he resisted, the more the industry seemed to bend to his will. But this came at a cost. McQueen's rebellious nature, while making him a box office sensation, alienated many of his peers and colleagues. At the same time, McQueen's reputation as a troublemaker only fueled his allure. The public loved him because he seemed untouchable, a man who answered to no one but himself. Hollywood feared his autonomy, and this dynamic was inextricably linked to McQueen's own insecurities. Despite his fame and success, McQueen often struggled with feelings of inadequacy. His constant push for independence was not just a reflection of his inner turmoil, but a defense mechanism against a world that he feared would abandon him. His internal conflict manifested both on and off the screen, and it was one of the driving forces behind his unpredictable behavior. This fear of losing control was compounded by McQueen's battle with his own demons. His struggles with alcoholism, his emotional volatility, and his reluctance to fully commit to relationships were all part of the complexity that made McQueen a Hollywood icon. On the one hand, he was a symbol of strength and power. On the other, he was a man wrestling with his past and his own vulnerabilities. The more he fought to maintain control, the more Hollywood's elite grew uneasy. His refusal to conform turned him into a Hollywood enigma, a star whose fame was as dangerous as it was magnetic. In many ways, McQueen's rebellion in Hollywood defined the era in which he rose to fame. The 1960s and 1970s were a time of cultural upheaval, and McQueen embodied the spirit of the time. He was the embodiment of the disillusioned youth who rejected the norms of society and sought to forge their own path, no matter the cost. His role in films like The Thomas Crown Affair, 1968, and Le Mans, 1971, reinforced his status as an anti-establishment figure. But even as he became the face of rebellion, McQueen's internal conflict continued to plague him. His defiance of Hollywood wasn't just about rejecting the system. It was about a deeper struggle with his identity, his past, and the fear of losing himself in the very industry that had made him a star. Steve McQueen's rise to stardom is often romanticized as the journey of a rough-edged, rebellious figure who conquered Hollywood through sheer willpower and talent. However, what many don't realize is that McQueen's early life was filled with hardship and trauma, experiences that would come to shape his entire career and personal life. His childhood was a series of challenges, marked by abandonment, neglect, and poverty, and these formative years left deep scars that McQueen would carry with him throughout his life. Born in 1930 in Indianapolis, Indiana, McQueen was the product of a broken family. His mother, a young woman struggling with her own demons, was unable to provide McQueen with the stability he needed. His father, who had been absent from McQueen's life since his birth, left the family when McQueen was very young. Growing up in a turbulent household, McQueen found himself in a cycle of constant upheaval. His mother, unable to care for him, sent him to live with relatives. It wasn't long before McQueen was shuffled between different homes, each more unstable than the last. This sense of displacement and abandonment would form the core of McQueen's psychological makeup. As a child, McQueen was often described as a loner, someone who kept to himself, and this isolation was likely a coping mechanism for the emotional neglect he faced. With no consistent father figure in his life, McQueen lacked the guidance that many children take for granted. In his later years, McQueen admitted that he often felt a deep sense of worthlessness, which likely stemmed from his early experiences of being abandoned by both parents. These feelings of rejection and emotional deprivation played a pivotal role in shaping McQueen's need for control and his unrelenting desire to prove his worth to the world. McQueen's troubled childhood didn't just affect his personal life, it had a profound influence on his career. His need to prove himself manifested in a deep-seated desire for success and recognition. It was as if McQueen was always trying to fill the emotional void left by his parents' neglect. For him, success in Hollywood wasn't just about fame. It was about achieving a sense of self-worth that he had never been able to establish as a child. His rebelliousness on screen wasn't just an act. It was a reflection of his ongoing struggle for validation. He channeled the pain from his past into his performances, using the anger, hurt, and defiance that had built up inside him to fuel his characters. McQueen's tumultuous early years also influenced the way he approached relationships. Despite his charm and magnetic presence, McQueen's inability to connect with others on an emotional level often created turmoil in his personal life. His marriage to Neil Adams, for example, was marked by emotional distance, with McQueen frequently retreating into his own world, unable to fully engage with his wife and family. The same patterns repeated in his relationship with Ali McGraw, where McQueen's internal demons, his sense of insecurity and fear of abandonment, often led to clashes and heartbreak. His inability to maintain long-term, healthy relationships mirrored the instability he had experienced as a child, where love and affection were elusive. His need for independence and control in Hollywood was also a byproduct of his early life. Having been shuffled between homes and denied the security of a traditional family structure, McQueen became fiercely protective of his autonomy. In the cutthroat world of Hollywood, where stars were often manipulated by studios and producers, McQueen's insistence on maintaining control over his career became his way of reclaiming the power he had lost as a child. This desire for control, however, came at a cost. It alienated many of his peers and made working with him a challenge for directors and producers. But McQueen was willing to pay that price, as his need for autonomy far outweighed his need for acceptance in the Hollywood elite. McQueen's internal battles were often masked by his tough guy persona, but those who knew him best recognized the vulnerability beneath the surface. The anger that fueled his performances was not just a product of his acting talent, it was the result of years of unresolved pain from his past. This vulnerability was what made McQueen such a compelling actor. He didn't just portray tough characters, he embodied them, making his performances raw and authentic. Audiences could feel the conflict within him, the battle between the tough, rebellious exterior and the fragile, wounded soul beneath. Despite the success that came with his career, McQueen was never able to fully escape the scars of his past. In his later years, as he faced health problems and struggled with personal demons, McQueen would often reflect on the choices he had made and the mistakes he had repeated in his relationships and career. It was clear that his childhood had shaped not just his personality, but his entire worldview. The insecurity he felt as a child was still present in his adult life, driving his quest for recognition and validation. McQueen's childhood also instilled in him a sense of fear of being abandoned, fear of being controlled, and fear of not measuring up. This fear, though it was masked by his defiance, was what ultimately made him a complex and tragic figure. The rebellious spirit that made him a Hollywood icon was the very thing that isolated him from those around him. His inability to reconcile his inner turmoil with the world around him was the dark side of his legend. In the end, Steve McQueen's troubled childhood was the driving force behind much of his behavior, both on and off screen. The scars of abandonment, neglect, and instability defined him in ways that even his fame and success could not erase. His legacy as the King of Cool is inseparable from the darkness that haunted him, a man whose rebellious spirit and internal struggles made him one of the most compelling and enigmatic stars in Hollywood history. One of the defining characteristics of Steve McQueen was his undeniable passion for speed and risk-taking. His affinity for racing cars and motorcycles wasn't just a hobby, it was a vital part of his persona. In many ways, McQueen's obsession with speed mirrored his approach to life, always on the edge, always seeking the next thrill, and often to the point of self-destruction. This obsession would come to define both his on-screen roles and his off-screen behavior, showcasing a man who lived life fast and sometimes dangerously. McQueen's love of motorsports began long before he ever became a Hollywood star. Growing up in a rough environment, McQueen had always sought out ways to channel his aggression and inner turmoil. As a teenager, he took to the streets and began racing motorcycles, finding an outlet for the anger and frustration that had built up inside him. Motorcycling became an addiction, not just for the thrill of the ride, but for the sense of freedom and control it gave him. In racing, McQueen wasn't Steve McQueen, the famous actor. He was just a man on a bike, pushing the limits of speed and skill. This love for the rush of adrenaline would later translate into many of his most famous film roles, where he often portrayed characters who lived on the edge. One of McQueen's most iconic roles was in the film Le Mans 1971, a movie that in many ways was a love letter to his passion for racing. The film depicted McQueen as a professional race car driver, and he took the role so seriously that he insisted on performing many of the driving stunts himself. The production was notorious for the number of injuries that occurred on set, as McQueen's desire for realism led him to take risks that others might have avoided. He was determined to make the racing scenes as authentic as possible, even if it meant putting himself in danger. His dedication to the role led to a few near misses, but McQueen's determination to get the perfect shot was unshakable. It was clear that his obsession with speed and risk was far more than just an aspect of his character. It was a reflection of his personal philosophy. In real life, McQueen's love of speed didn't stop at the racetrack. His garage was filled with a variety of cars and motorcycles, each one a testament to his need for power and performance. McQueen's passion for speed was so intense that he became a skilled mechanic in his own right, often working on his own vehicles and customizing them to suit his personal tastes. His vehicles weren't just means of transportation, they were extensions of himself, reflecting his need for control and mastery. McQueen was known for being a perfectionist when it came to his cars, always looking for ways to improve their performance, and his passion for engines and speed became one of the most defining aspects of his personal life. But McQueen's obsession with speed and risk-taking wasn't without consequences. On several occasions, his need for thrill-seeking would push him to the brink of disaster. In 1970, while filming Le Mans, McQueen was involved in a serious car crash that nearly cost him his life. The accident, which occurred during a race scene, left him with a serious back injury that would affect him for the rest of his life. The crash was a reminder of how far McQueen was willing to go to get the perfect shot, and how his obsession with risk often crossed the line between passion and recklessness. For McQueen, however, the crash was just another chapter in his ongoing pursuit of the ultimate rush. It didn't deter him from racing or from pushing the limits. If anything, it only fueled his obsession further. McQueen's love of speed and danger also extended to his personal life, where his relationships with women were often just as fast-paced and reckless as his driving. His marriages were tumultuous, and his string of high-profile affairs spoke to his need for excitement and thrill in every aspect of his life. It wasn't just about love or commitment. It was about living life on the edge, constantly seeking out the next adventure. McQueen's relationships often mirrored his relationship with racing, intense, passionate, but ultimately unsustainable. Just as he pushed his cars to the limit, McQueen pushed his romantic relationships, never quite satisfied with the balance or stability that others sought. In addition to his personal relationships, McQueen's time in Hollywood was marked by a series of risky ventures. He was often seen at racetracks and in garage workshops, surrounded by other racing enthusiasts and mechanics. But his involvement in racing wasn't just about being a participant. It was about immersing himself in the world of speed, surrounded by like-minded individuals who shared his desire for thrills. McQueen's passion for racing became an integral part of his identity, and his public persona as a rebel was only amplified by his involvement in a world that glorified risk. Despite his numerous accidents and near-death experiences, McQueen's obsession with speed remained constant throughout his life. The need for adrenaline, the rush of being in control, and the allure of danger kept him hooked on racing. Even as his health began to deteriorate in the 1970s, McQueen continued to race motorcycles and cars, a testament to his obsession with living life at full speed. His physical limitations didn't stop him from pursuing his passion. If anything, they made the need for speed even more urgent. McQueen's story is a reminder of the fine line between passion and obsession. His love for racing and speed made him one of Hollywood's most unique and fearless stars, but also contributed to the darker aspects of his life. The thrill of racing was something McQueen couldn't escape, and it served as both a source of empowerment and a dangerous addiction. His need to chase the next rush, to live life fast and dangerously, ultimately shaped his legacy. It wasn't just about the films he made, it was about the way he lived, constantly pushing the boundaries of what was possible, both on and off the screen. Steve McQueen was a man whose life was as complicated off-screen as it was on. Known for his rugged persona and reputation as a ladies' man, McQueen's relationships with women were a fascinating part of his complex identity. While the world saw him as a hard-edged rebel with a charming smile, those closest to him knew a different side, a man who, despite his best efforts to stay emotionally detached, often found himself caught in the tangled web of love, heartbreak, and betrayal. His relationships were anything but simple, often reflecting the same chaos and turmoil that defined his own life. One of the most significant relationships in McQueen's life was his marriage to Neil Adams, an actress and dancer. The two married in 1956, and it was a union that would define much of McQueen's early adulthood. On the surface, their marriage seemed like a match made in Hollywood heaven, two beautiful, talented people who shared the same glamorous world. But beneath the surface, their relationship was filled with tension and strife. McQueen, despite his fame, struggled with emotional intimacy, and this distance often caused friction between him and Neil. His deep-seated fear of abandonment, likely stemming from his childhood, made it difficult for him to fully commit to his wife. Despite their problems, Neil was one of the few women in McQueen's life who truly understood him. She was his first real love, and for a time, their marriage was strong. But as McQueen's fame grew and his career took off, their relationship began to unravel. McQueen's increasing obsession with work, coupled with his personal demons, created a rift that would ultimately lead to their divorce in 1972. The split was anything but amicable, with McQueen moving on quickly to a string of affairs, including one with actress Ali MacGraw. But even after their separation, McQueen and Neil remained close, and she would later play a key role in caring for him during his final years as he battled cancer. Their bond, though fractured, never truly broke, which spoke to the complicated and often contradictory nature of McQueen's relationships. McQueen's affair with Ali MacGraw, during the filming of The Getaway, 1972, was one of the most publicized and controversial aspects of his personal life. At the time, MacGraw was married to actor Robert Evans, the head of Paramount Pictures, and her affair with McQueen created a scandal that made headlines. The passionate relationship between McQueen and MacGraw seemed like a natural extension of the intense, rebellious energy that McQueen exuded in both his career and personal life. MacGraw, who was known for her own beauty and fiery independence, was captivated by McQueen's raw energy, and their chemistry was undeniable. However, McQueen's obsession with independence and his fear of emotional vulnerability would once again come to the forefront, and their relationship, though intense, was short-lived. The breakup between McQueen and MacGraw was, like many of his other relationships, a reflection of his inability to fully open up and commit. McQueen, despite being surrounded by beautiful women, never seemed able to find a lasting, fulfilling relationship. His commitment issues, combined with his fear of intimacy, often led to turbulence and heartbreak. But despite the chaos of his love life, McQueen never stopped seeking connection, perhaps because he was desperately trying to fill the emotional void left by his traumatic childhood. Perhaps the most tragic and telling of McQueen's relationships was his marriage to actress Barbara Minty. McQueen married Minty in 1980, when he was already battling the cancer that would eventually take his life. Their relationship, though brief, was marked by the same intensity and passion that characterized McQueen's previous affairs. But unlike the others, Minty was the woman who would stand by McQueen in his final years, offering him the support and care he needed as he faced his mortality. It was in this relationship that McQueen's vulnerability finally came to the forefront. Minty was the one woman who was able to penetrate McQueen's emotional walls and offer him the love and security he had so desperately craved throughout his life. McQueen's complex relationships with women were also reflected in his public persona. He was constantly linked to a string of beautiful actresses and models, many of whom were drawn to his rugged charm and his magnetic presence. His affairs, whether brief or intense, became a part of Hollywood lore, with rumors of his romantic entanglements constantly swirling in the tabloids. McQueen's image as a ladies' man was a carefully constructed part of his public persona, but it was also an expression of his inner conflict. Despite his reputation as a womanizer, McQueen's relationships were often marked by a deep emotional yearning, an attempt to find something or someone to fill the emptiness inside him. Despite the constant cycle of love and heartbreak, McQueen's relationships with women were an essential part of his identity. They reflected his quest for emotional connection, his fear of vulnerability, and his inability to fully engage with the people who loved him. McQueen was a man who, despite his fame and success, was never able to find peace with himself. His relationships, like his career, were filled with passion, intensity, and chaos. In the end, it wasn't the women who shaped his life. It was his unresolved pain, his emotional scars, and his desire to be loved. His story, like his relationships, was one of searching for meaning and fulfillment, only to find that the greatest love he could ever find was the one that would allow him to accept himself. Despite being one of the most iconic figures of his era, Steve McQueen's life in Hollywood was anything but glamorous. The very fame that made him a household name also created a dark side to his existence, one filled with loneliness, isolation, and inner turmoil. While the world saw McQueen as a rugged, confident man with everything at his fingertips, those closest to him knew a different reality, a man who often felt like a stranger in his own life, battling with feelings of inadequacy and alienation. McQueen's relationship with fame was complicated, to say the least. He was often described as someone who hated the Hollywood spotlight, despite the fact that it was his ticket to everything he had ever dreamed of. For McQueen, fame came with a cost, one that he was never fully prepared to pay. As his star rose, so did the expectations placed on him. Directors, producers, and the public all had a vision of who McQueen was supposed to be, and the pressure to live up to that image weighed heavily on him. Rather than reveling in the accolades, McQueen often recoiled from them, seeking solace in isolation or in his beloved motorsports. McQueen's resentment towards the Hollywood machine became evident in the way he handled his career. He was known for being difficult to work with, often clashing with directors and producers who tried to control his image. His insistence on maintaining autonomy over his roles was both a reflection of his rebellious spirit and his desire to escape the suffocating constraints of fame. In many ways, McQueen's attitude toward Hollywood was that of an outsider looking in. He never fully embraced the trappings of fame, and the constant attention from the public only heightened his sense of isolation. While McQueen struggled to reconcile his fame with his personal desires, he also battled with deep feelings of insecurity. Despite being one of the most successful actors of his generation, McQueen often doubted his own worth. His childhood experiences of neglect and abandonment left him with a constant fear of rejection, and this fear followed him into his adult life. He was always seeking validation, whether from his peers, the public, or the women he loved, but it was never enough to quell the loneliness he felt inside. McQueen was, in many ways, a man at war with himself, constantly trying to prove his value, while also retreating from the very world that had made him a star. This sense of isolation was further exacerbated by McQueen's inability to connect with others on a deep, emotional level. His relationships, as discussed earlier, were often marked by intensity, but lacked the emotional intimacy that many people seek in a partner. McQueen's detachment wasn't just limited to his romantic relationships. It extended to his friendships and even his family. Despite having a close-knit group of peers in Hollywood, McQueen rarely opened up about his personal struggles, choosing instead to retreat into solitude or distractions like racing. He often felt misunderstood by those around him, further reinforcing his belief that he was alone in the world. McQueen's isolation was not just a product of his own making, it was also a reflection of the dark side of Hollywood itself. The industry was known for its cutthroat nature, where stars were often treated as commodities rather than human beings. McQueen, like many actors of his era, was constantly subjected to scrutiny and manipulation by studio heads, agents, and the press. The public image of the cool anti-hero that McQueen projected on screen was carefully curated persona, but off-screen, he was vulnerable and human, struggling to make sense of his place in an industry that often saw him as nothing more than a product to be marketed. At the height of his fame, McQueen became disillusioned with the Hollywood system. He often spoke about the emptiness of the industry and how it consumed people, turning them into mere cogs in a larger machine. This disillusionment led McQueen to seek refuge in other passions, such as racing and motorcycle riding, which allowed him to escape the pressures of Hollywood and feel in control of his own destiny. For McQueen, the rush of speed on a motorcycle or in a race car offered a form of freedom that acting never could. It was in these moments of solitude, away from the cameras and the flashing lights, that McQueen was able to experience true peace. But the peace McQueen sought was always fleeting. His struggles with fame and isolation took a toll on his mental and physical health. As the years passed, the cracks in McQueen's facade became more apparent. He became more withdrawn, less willing to engage with the world around him. His reputation as a loner grew, and the once invincible king of cool was increasingly seen as a man who had lost his way. Yet, even in his later years, McQueen remained determined to maintain control over his life and career, refusing to be defined by the industry that had both made him a star and broken him down. Despite his struggles, McQueen's legacy in Hollywood is undeniable. His films, such as The Great Escape, Bullet, and Papillon, remain iconic to this day, and his on-screen persona as the ultimate anti-hero continues to inspire new generations of actors and fans. But behind the scenes, McQueen was a man trapped by his own fame, forever chasing something he could never quite grasp, a sense of peace, belonging, and self-acceptance. McQueen's story serves as a cautionary tale about the dark side of fame, the loneliness, the isolation, and the emotional toll that comes with being constantly in the public eye. His life was a reminder that, even for the most celebrated stars, fame does not offer the happiness or fulfillment that many believe it does. McQueen's struggles with fame were not just a personal battle. They were a reflection of the larger, often brutal reality of Hollywood, where the cost of success can sometimes be more than anyone is willing to pay. Steve McQueen's death in 1980, at the age of 50, marked the end of an era. However, his impact on Hollywood and popular culture endures to this day. Despite his relatively short life, McQueen's legacy as the ultimate cool icon remains unchallenged. His films, style, and rebellious attitude shaped an entire generation and continue to inspire new waves of actors, filmmakers, and fans. Yet, McQueen's legacy is more than just his on-screen persona. It's the story of a man who lived on his own terms, for better or worse, and whose influence extends far beyond the silver screen. McQueen's approach to acting and his screen presence were revolutionary for their time. He was not the typical leading man. He wasn't the suave, polished hero that audiences were accustomed to seeing. Instead, McQueen embodied a raw, gritty, and rebellious masculinity that was a stark contrast to the clean-cut heroes of his era. Whether he was a fugitive in The Great Escape, 1963, a tough cop in Bullitt, 1968, or a determined prisoner in Papillon, 1973, McQueen's characters resonated with audiences for their authenticity and independence. He wasn't playing to the crowd, he was simply being himself, a quality that made his performances feel more real, more visceral, and more relatable. The cool factor that McQueen became known for wasn't just about how he looked, it was how he carried himself. His minimalistic, yet striking, style became legendary. McQueen's trademark wardrobe, ranging from a simple t-shirt and jeans to his iconic military-style jackets, embodied a sort of effortless cool that has been emulated by countless others. He wore clothing with a sense of confidence and ease, often blending high fashion with casual working-class appeal. His love of motorcycles and cars, and the way he carried himself in them, only amplified his tough guy image. McQueen didn't need to say much, his presence alone spoke volumes, making him a style and cultural icon, a status that transcended Hollywood. McQueen's real influence, however, wasn't just limited to how he looked or the films he starred in. His lifestyle, his love of speed, danger, and independence left a lasting imprint on the culture of the time. He became the embodiment of the anti-hero, a character type that rejected conformity and sought freedom, often at great personal cost. McQueen's tough demeanor and disregard for authority resonated with audiences during the 1960s and 1970s, an era marked by social upheaval and a growing disillusionment with traditional values. His on-screen roles, along with his off-screen persona, helped define the ethos of a generation seeking to break away from the status quo. But McQueen's influence didn't stop with his fans. He also reshaped the roles available to men in Hollywood. Before McQueen, the typical leading man in films was often a polished and heroic figure. McQueen, however, helped introduce a new type of masculinity that was rough around the edges, flawed, and more human. His characters were often loners, driven by a need for independence and self-reliance, qualities that resonated deeply with audiences of the time. McQueen's roles broke away from traditional portrayals of masculinity, making space for more complex, conflicted, and ultimately more relatable heroes. In addition to his impact on the image of men in film, McQueen's influence also extended to the way action films were made. His iconic car chase in Bullitt is often cited as one of the most important moments in action cinema, setting a new standard for realism in car chases. McQueen's insistence on doing many of his own stunts, particularly his motorcycle and car driving, changed the expectations of action stars and filmmakers. His dedication to realism and authenticity influenced not only the genre but also how stunts were handled in future films, helping pave the way for modern action stars like Tom Cruise, Jason Statham, and others. Despite McQueen's early death, his legacy continues to live on in Hollywood today. His films are still celebrated, his style is still emulated, and his rebellious attitude is still admired. Filmmakers and actors continue to pay homage to McQueen's influence, from references to his characters in modern films to his iconic style being mimicked in fashion campaigns. He remains an inspiration to those who value individuality, authenticity, and living life on their own terms. For a man who spent much of his life struggling with personal demons and professional challenges, McQueen's lasting legacy is nothing short of extraordinary. Yet, McQueen's story is also a cautionary tale. His battles with fame, personal relationships, and his inner demons serve as a reminder of the price of fame and the complexities that come with it. Despite his massive success, McQueen struggled to find happiness, often turning to dangerous outlets like racing and tumultuous relationships to fill the void inside him. His death from cancer, after years of battling the disease, added another layer of tragedy to his life, showing just how fleeting and fragile life can be, no matter how much fame or wealth one achieves. In the years following his death, McQueen's legacy has only grown. His name is synonymous with cool, toughness, and the pursuit of freedom at all costs. His story, while filled with pain, loss, and struggle, is also one of defiance, of refusing to conform, and of living authentically, no matter the consequences. McQueen's life serves as both a beacon of inspiration and a warning, illustrating that while the pursuit of individuality and freedom can bring great rewards, it can also lead to personal destruction if not carefully navigated. Today, Steve McQueen remains one of Hollywood's most enduring legends, a symbol of masculinity, rebellion, and individuality that still resonates with audiences around the world. His journey from a troubled childhood to Hollywood icon is a testament to the power of perseverance and self-determination, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The King of Cool may be gone, but his influence on film, culture, and style will continue to live on for generations to come.